Welcome to part 3 of EVE 101 presented by CrossingZebras.com. In this video we'll be looking at the main focus of EVE Online, the player's starship. There are many classifications for the various ships in the game. Primarily they are divided up into player versus player and PvE, but both styles and gameplay use the same ships. The three main categories that pertain to these sort of ships are the DPS ships, who inflict damage upon their targets, the logistic ships, who provide a supportive role to the other ships, and electronic warfare ships, who aim to disrupt the enemy through various modules and methods. Due to the specialized purpose of the ships that fall under one of these three categories, a player or character must have the related skills to not only fly the ship in question, but use the appropriate modules. The requirements to fly a ship, as well as use the necessary modules, increases the higher up into the tech tree you go. For example, it takes less skills to fly a base level frigate than that of, say, a cruiser. There are three different tech levels that apply to the ships. Each tech level reflects the difficulty in creating the ship with the in-game materials at the appropriate facilities. For this video, we'll skip over that sort of mechanic and emphasize that the higher the tech level of a ship, the more expensive it is to make, and thus the higher cost on the in-game market. When looking at the tech tree for these ships, the three levels are as follows. Tech 1 is the baseline for all other ships in that tree. These can usually be learned in just a few minutes. Tech 2 ships are a step up and provide higher bonuses when defending against certain types of weapons. They also can apply far more damage than Tech 1 ships. The third tech level, fittingly called Tech 3, have the most advanced ships and can absorb far more damage than their Tech 1 or Tech 2 counterparts. These Tech 3 ships also require special modules called subsystems. The cost of a Tech 3 ship is high due to the rarity of finding the components to make them. Ships are also differentiated due to the faction that they were created by. Each of the Empire factions, the Caldari, Gallente, Ammar, and Minmatar, also have distinct characteristics to their ships. For the Caldari, their ships typically rely upon shields for protection while using missiles and railguns for weaponry. The Caldari also have a large array of electronic warfare ships. Compared to the other factions, they are also the slowest moving. When it comes to electronic warfare, the Caldari ships rely upon what are called ECM, or electronic countermeasures. These break the target lock of an opponent, but can be deflected by electronic countermeasures. Don't worry, we'll cover module types in a later video, but for now we'll list what sort of electronic warfare each faction specializes in. Gallente ships tend to rely on armor tanking for defensive purposes. Their ships use the hybrid turret weapons, allowing for both long-range and close-range fighting. They also are a faction that has a heavier reliance on combat drones, which is more or less a deployable minion. In regards to the Gallente electronic warfare specialization, they tend to use what are called sensor dampeners. These reduce the effectiveness of the target ship's sensors, making them take longer to lock onto an enemy ship, or reducing the maximum range that they can lock on at. Ammar ships have a very specific ethic that they don't stray far from. Their ships have thick armor and rely upon using laser turrets. This simplistic approach does result in Ammar ships being the least complicated to fly, but also the easiest to counter. Ammar use energy neutralizers as their form of electronic warfare. Energy neutralizers are a module that drain the capacitor of a target vessel, but also require a large amount of capacitor to be used. When it comes to the concept of a capacitor, think of it as a ship's battery and the ability to use all its different modules. When a ship runs out of capacitor, they are no longer able to use offensive or defensive modules. The Minmatar ships focus on a hit-and-run strategy. These are typically the fastest in the game and provide the most flexibility. The main weapon type Minmatar ships use are projectile turrets, but they can also use missiles, which grants flexibility in the types of damage that can be dealt. The Minmatar ships can also be fitted towards shield or armor defenses, although it is more common to see a Minmatar ship with shield defensive modules. The Minmatar electronic warfare of choice is what is called a target painter. This module increases the signature radius of an enemy ship, which allows missiles fired at the target to do more damage, as well as causing turrets and drones to hit more easily. A signature radius is a determining factor in how easy it is to lock on and track a target ship. We'll cover the signature radius in our video on modules at a later point. There are also faction-specific ships. These usually cost more than their Tech 1 or Tech 2 counterparts, again due to the difficulty in getting them. To get a faction ship, a player must either have loyalty points with that particular faction, usually earned during missions for that faction, or buying through the in-game market. The four main Empire factions aren't the only groups who have their own specialized ships. There are several other NPC factions in the game. These are referred to as the pirate factions, which are the following groups, along with bonuses their ships receive. The Angel Cartel, who have a merging of Minmatar and Gallente ships, have bonuses to projectile turrets and warp speed. The Blood Raiders, who are a mixture of Ammar and Minmatar technology, grant a bonus to their ship's web range. This is the distance a ship can use a module that falls under the web stasis category. Web stasis modules prevent ships from moving at a fast speed, allowing other ships to catch up. Blood Raider ships also get a bonus to the usage of neutralizing modules. Like the Ammar, these modules remove the target ship's capacitor level. What makes the Blood Raider ships unique is that they can continuously drain a target ship's capacitor level, absorbing it themselves, even when they are full on capacitor. The Guristas, a pirate faction that uses Caldari and Galente technology, give bonuses to their ship's shield strength and missiles. They also give a damage bonus to the deployable drones, but can only fit 2 drones as a result. Mordu's Legion, who also combine Caldari and Galente technology, give bonuses to their ship missile damage and warp disruption range. Warp disruption is a module type that simply prevents an enemy ship from warping off. Missiles fired by Mordu's Legion ships also travel 3 times faster than any other ship. Sansha's Nation ships blend Ammar and Caldari ships together. They have bonuses to energy turrets such as lasers and the afterburner. An afterburner is a type of module that helps increase the speed of a ship when it's not in warp. Ships built by Serpentis are a combination of Galente and Minmatar ships. These ships give bonuses to hybrid turrets as well as the web strength. A single web module from a Serpentis ship is powerful enough to reduce a target speed to 10% of its normal value. This allows other ships to catch up and destroy the target with greater ease. There is one final faction, but they're not considered a true pirate faction. The Sisters of Eve are, through EVE Online's backstory, more like an intergalactic Red Cross, though they've made ships to help them in their endeavors. These ships combine Ammar and Galente traits. Each of the ships have bonuses to armor and drones. They also get a bonus to the non-PvP act of analyzing relic and data sites. This is more geared towards players doing PvE rather than PvP. The frigate and cruiser class ships of this faction can also fit a covert ops cloaking device, which allows them to hide from sight and warp between locations while cloaked. The battleship created by the Sisters of Eve doesn't get this bonus, but gets a bonus to remote armor repair, a module type that allows a ship to heal its armor, and a ship maintenance bay. The ship maintenance bay allows the player, or members of its fleet, to refit their ship without the need to be docked in a station. When we talk about ships having shield or armor bonuses, we're referring to the 2 main defensive types. Each ship has 3 stages of health: shield, armor, and hull. The difference between shields when compared to armor and hull is that shields can slowly recover over time without the need of a module. However, you can also fit an active module to speed up that recovery time for the shields. A ship's armor health requires the use of a module on a friendly logistic ship, or repairing it in a station. The same applies to the ship's hull. Once all 3 health states run out, the ship is destroyed and the player is ejected into space in their pod. As mentioned in the video on pilots, dying in your pod destroys your player clone. Ships aren't just designed towards PvP. The concept of player versus environment is strong in E, so much so that almost all the ships you see in PvP can be used for PvE. However, fitting a ship for PvP does not necessarily mean it will work well in PvE. Each of the game's various NPC factions also have their own strengths and weaknesses, and depending on what sort of PvE missions the player is taking part in, they want to exploit those. The same can be said for PvE ships trying to PvP. Most of the time, a PvE ship can't survive attack by a PvP player, nor can a PvP ship survive doing high-level PvE missions. Added to this, there are what are called industrial ships, that players use to move materials, mining ores, or to engage in salvaging. Each of the 4 main factions provide their own ships that move materials. These ships fall into the category of haulers or freighters. Haulers are smaller, more agile transport ships, while freighters can certainly hold more items, but move at a slower speed. There are also what are called jump freighter class ships. These ships, like the freighters, are large and bulky, but have the ability to use a built-in jump drive. This allows the ship to jump several light years away without the need to use a gate. These hauling ships are part of the logistical backbone that allows a player group to make money, as well as relocate throughout the map. Mining ships are rather self-explanatory, so I won't go into specific details for them. There are different sizes and classes of mining ship, each with their own unique bonuses and roles. Each and every player-controlled ship in the game requires what are called modules. Think of these as different tools that let your ship do things both actively and passively. As I said in the section on skill books, each module requires a certain amount of skills to be learned before using it. To fit a module, each ship has what are called module slots. They are split into 4 categories: high slots, mid slots, low slots, and rigs. Every ship has a different number of module slots, making certain ships more useful for different things. Knowing how to fit your ship is vitally important to EVE Online. There are many different concepts and aspects to this mechanic, and it's not something we can go into too much detail. However, there are plenty of YouTube videos, player threads, and other venues for discussing how to fit a ship in the most optimal way. When you undock your ship and get involved in EVE's gameplay, using your modules will take up what is called capacitor. We already likened the capacitor to a battery. It's not the most appropriate analogy, but it works quite well. When fitting your ship, you can only activate modules so long as your ship's capacitor can support them. It's why you don't see a smaller frigate-class ship using ship modules intended for larger ships. In EVE, ships are also split into two categories: subcapitals and capitals. Subcapital ships is a term that refers to ships such as the frigate, destroyer, cruiser, battlecruiser, and battleship. These are the main ships players are seen using in the game. However, capital ships, which include capital industrial ships, carriers, dreadnoughts, freighters, jump freighters, and titans, are also common. Freighters, jump freighters, and capital industrial ships are used for money-making purposes and rarely see combat, unless they are being attacked. The other ships within the capital ship category tend to only come out into large fights. There are also what are called supercapital ships, which include the Titan class and the supercarrier. These are, in some regards, EVE's endgame when it comes to the discussion of flying a ship. As you can already guess, subcapitals are significantly cheaper than capital ships. That's it for this overview of the in-game ships for EVE Online. We'll discuss other aspects of ships such as modules as we progress later into the series. If you are looking for the general thought process and mindset when it comes to fitting a ship in game, check out Jeff Rader's PvP fitting series on CrossingZebras.com.